Malik Johnson knew the acoustics of Heritage Capital Bank's marble atrium better than anyone. The hall had carried his footsteps from dreaming intern to youngest vice president, from first-time CEO to mentor of dozens of black analysts who, like him, believed finance could be rewritten. But on the Friday before Juneteenth, the echo that met him was foreign. Security boots, not welcome bells. 2 guards flanked the revolving door. Between them stood Preston Hale, the chairman who had once toasted Malik with 70-year-old cognac. He handed Malik a folder. The letterhead was the same one Malik had approved last month, engraved emerald ink. The words beneath were a corporate dagger. Effective immediately, the board has voted to remove you from the position of Chief Executive Officer. Malik looked up, searching for a friend in the lobby. The receptionist who called him Mr. J, the courier, who joked he moved too fast. They were absent. It was 6:07 a.m., an hour he'd chosen for quiet strategy. The chairman had chosen it for quiet exile. "What's my alleged misconduct?" Malik asked, voice measured. Hale shrugged. "We need decisive leadership in uncertain markets. The board thinks diversity initiatives and community lending have distracted from shareholder value." "You mean profits dipped after we refused to underwrite that private prison ret?" Malik fired back. He was escorted out the side stairwell, cardboard box in hand. New York air hit him like freezer wind. June felt like February. Flurries of paper slipped from the box. Plan drafts, black-owned business prospect lists, his daughter's crayon drawing of Daddy's bank. An older woman stooped to help gather pages. "They won't bury you, baby," she whispered. "Make sure they remember your name." Across the street, a digital billboard flickered Heritage's slogan, "Restoring Trust, Creating Wealth." Malik's phone buzzed. Hundreds of staff chat messages, shocked emojis, hearts, "We stand with." "Malik." The last read, "We're in the conference center." "Say the word," he typed. "Hold your positions. I'm coming home." A yellow cab splashed to the curb. Malik climbed in, balancing the box on his knees. Traffic crawled. His reflection wobbled beside streaming headlines. Heritage, ousts, trailblazing, CEO, shares rise. The crawl didn't mention the 2,700 new homeowners whose mortgages he'd approved, or the small business loans that had kept family diners open during the pandemic. He opened the folder. Termination clauses stacked like dominoes. At the end, a single line, severance package commensurate with tenure. He laughed, soft, incredulous. They thought money was the language he spoke. They forgot who taught him grammar. His grandmother, Lila May, ledger balanced on her lap, saying, "We don't chase dollars, we command them." His phone rang. Ayanna Lewis, chief counsel. "They locked all executive Slack accounts, but internal channels are blowing up. People are angry and ready." "Hold them," he said. "Anger spends fast, strategy compounds." The cab climbed the bridge. Dawn painted the East River copper. Malik pictured a headquarters rising from shared conviction. He texted Lionel Green at Diaspora Fund, "Need a sit-down today." Opportunity declared itself. Lionel replied with a handshake emoji. Back at Heritage, Hale would soon tell cameras about leadership transition. Malik smiled at the thought that algorithms could not calculate courage. The cab reached his brownstone in Bed-Stuy. On the stoop sat Marcus, his mentee from the internship program, clutching coffee and a laptop. "I saw the news," Marcus said. "I pulled the server logs." Inside, the living room became a war room. Laptops bloomed open like mechanical flowers. Marcus projected login metrics, overnight spikes, deleted chat threads, digital footprints harder to erase than human ones. Ayanna arrived next, followed by Devonte from Community Lending, Priya from Risk Analysis, and Yvonne from Marketing. They formed a circle around Malik's dining table. Hoodies replaced suits. Determination replaced protocol. First agenda item, Malik began. We decide whether the mission was tied to the building or to us. It was always us, Priya answered. Good. Second, we protect our people. Anyone who stays in heritage must not become collateral damage. Third, we turn their narrative on its head, prove that diversity is not cost, but capital. Ayana raised her tablet. We have grounds for a Section 1981 suit. Prepare it, Malik said, but legal action is our shield, not our sword. Our sword is vision. He outlined a plan. Convene community investors, leverage goodwill into capital, launch Equitrust Collective within 90 days. Silence followed, not doubt, but awe. Then Marcus grinned. They thought they kicked you out, they just kicked you forward. They broke into task groups. Yvonne drafted a manifesto. They can evict a man, not a movement. Devonte mapped lending deserts across the boroughs. Priya built stress tests for microloans, inputting variables labeled hope and spite, her private joke. By afternoon, the brownstone hummed like a trading floor. Malik stood at the window watching kids chalk hopscotch on the pavement. For the first time since sunrise, he let himself feel the bruise of betrayal. It ached, but beneath the ache thrummed conviction. Heritage had been a ceiling. Exile had handed him sky. His daughter Amara burst in from school, braids swinging. She noticed the box. "Why are your things here, Daddy?" "Because sometimes grown-ups forget whose house they're in," he said, kneeling. "So we're building a bigger one." "Can I help?" "You already are," he whispered, hugging her. Evening settled. Across the city, Heritage's closing bell echoed through empty hallways. Hale retreated to his corner office, unaware that servers quietly cloned archives he'd tried to delete. In Brooklyn, Malik added the last stroke to a headline on a whiteboard, Juneteenth Rising. Below it, he wrote the date, 13th June 2025, and a countdown, 7 days. He capped the marker, looked around at faces lit by purpose, and heard not the marble atrium's fading echo, but a new resonance, the heart of a community beating louder than any boardroom gavel. The bank had expelled its architect, but foundations laid in justice do not crumble, they expand. Outside, streetlights flickered on one by one, as if saluting the dawn arriving early for those who refused to bow tonight. Malik exhaled. The reclamation had begun. Before there were skyscrapers, boardrooms, and shareholder meetings, there was red earth. Malik Johnson's foundation was laid not in Wall Street boardrooms, but in the sun-baked front yard of his grandmother Lila May's house in Tulsa, Oklahoma, just 10 blocks from where Black Wall Street had once thrived before it was razed by hatred and fire. That house, a 2-bedroom clapboard with cracked white paint and a patchy lawn, wasn't much, but it was everything. In the living room, next to the plastic-covered sofa and under faded sepia photos, sat Lila May's ledger. It was thicker than the family Bible and older than any bank Malik had ever known. "Balance," she would say, "ain't just about math. It's about justice, about what people owe each other when the law won't help them." She didn't charge interest, not in the formal sense. People from the neighborhood, Miss Doris from the diner, Old Man Cleveland from the bait shop, would leave IOUs scribbled on receipts or pages torn from phone books. Lila May kept them all in that ledger, marked with payment terms like when your son gets a job or after harvest. Malik, just 10 years old, would sit cross-legged beside her, writing totals and whispering numbers like they were prayers. One summer afternoon, he asked, "Why don't you have a bank account, Grandma?" She looked at him, long and deep. "Because the last time we trusted a bank, they took our money and told us it was gone. But we remember, that's what they scared of most, our memory." She pointed to a photo on the mantel. Black men in crisp suits, standing proudly in front of a brick building with gold letters, Greenwood Savings and Loan, 1919. Her finger trembled. "They burnt that bank to the ground, but not the dream," she said. "Your job is to make sure the dream don't die." That moment lodged itself deep in Malik's soul. Years later, at Howard University, Malik declared economics as his major, not because he wanted to be rich, but because he wanted to understand the machinery that had kept his community poor. He studied finance, like others studied scripture. He wrote essays challenging interest structures and their impact on generational wealth. He co-founded a student fund called Ujamaa Capital, pooling student savings to give microloans to black-owned startups. His professors called him relentless. His classmates called him visionary. At 22, he landed an internship at Albright Hutton, a respected firm on Wall Street. On the surface, it was success. But beneath the mahogany conference tables and elevator small talk, Malik saw a system allergic to change. His very presence raised eyebrows. He was mistaken for a courier more than once. "You don't look like a quant," a managing director once said, laughing. Malik smiled, filed the memory, and got back to work. When he proposed a minority-owned business index fund, the partners smirked. "Cute," they said, "but not scalable." It didn't stop him. After 5 years of swallowing insults with espresso, he left and rented a dingy loft above a Brooklyn barbershop. With $37.50 pooled from the barbers downstairs, Malik founded Heritage Capital. No plush offices, no backing from venture firms, just a laptop, a plan, and a promise to return banking to the people it had excluded for generations. He called it heritage because it was more than money. It was memory and healing. The first account was opened by Miss Yvonne, a retired teacher who brought her life savings, $5,000 in worn bills inside a Crown Royal bag. She sat across from Malik and said, "I've been waiting 40 years to trust a bank again. Don't you disappoint me, baby?" He didn't. Malik began offering small business loans based on community referrals instead of credit scores. Default rates remained lower than industry standards. People came from across the boroughs: barbers, bakers, mechanics, doula collectives. He hired young black and brown analysts. He refused to use diversity as decoration. He paid interns, he listened, he taught, he built. By year 3, Heritage Capital crossed $50 million in deposits. It was still small but symbolic. Malik was profiled in Forbes as the radical banker. Wall Street didn't know whether to admire or fear him. When the pandemic hit, Malik suspended mortgage payments for 18 months. That same year, he launched FlexCheck, a no-fee account with overdraft forgiveness for gig workers and delivery drivers. Profits dipped slightly. Critics howled. The board grumbled. Malik stood firm. "Profit is not the opposite of justice," he told them. "It's what grows because of justice, if you know where to plant it." His daughter, Amara, was 5 when she drew her crayon version of Daddy's Bank. A smiling black man behind a counter, handing dollar bills to a line of grinning people. He taped it above his desk. In late 2024, Heritage reached $1.2 billion in assets under management. Malik expanded branches into food deserts and partnered with local grocery co-ops. He declined buyout offers from 3 national chains, but with success came scrutiny. Preston Hale, a legacy board member with deep ties to private equity, began questioning Malik's social leanings. "You're running a movement, not a company," Hale said during one closed-door meeting. Malik had smiled. "That's the point." The cracks were small at first, cutting back community grants, freezing hiring for outreach teams, rebalancing priorities. Malik fought every change. What he didn't know was that Hale and 2 other board members were quietly coordinating a campaign to oust him. They waited for the moment stock dipped just slightly after Malik announced his refusal to underwrite a high-yield prison bond offering. They said he lacked focus, that he was drifting from his core duties. They claimed shareholders wanted stability. Malik saw it for what it was, a hostile takeover wrapped in institutional politeness. But what they underestimated was the depth of his foundation. He wasn't just a CEO, he was a boy who had balanced ledgers on his grandmother's knee. A man whose community didn't just support him, they believed in him. When they pushed him out, they thought they were closing a chapter. They didn't realize they'd just awakened the author. And he was just getting started. The term glass ceiling had always been familiar to Malik Johnson. It was the barrier that kept qualified black professionals from reaching executive ranks. But what he hadn't learned until too late was the crueler cousin of that phenomenon, the glass cliff. It wasn't about being blocked from power, it was about being offered power only to be set up to fall. Malik's promotion to CEO of Heritage Capital had come during a turbulent quarter. Market volatility, client exits, and reputational crises plagued the bank. None of the internal candidates wanted to touch it. That's when the board turned to Malik, the black face they could parade as progress, the symbol of bold innovation in tough times. And Malik, filled with purpose, had accepted without hesitation. For the first year, it seemed he was rewriting history. He stabilized the balance sheets, oversaw the merger of 3 community banks into Heritage's portfolio, and expanded financial access to over 100,000 new customers across underserved zip codes. Heritage began to trend in the right circles, praised for marrying profitability with community impact. But under the surface, dissent was brewing. Malik began proposing long-term equity strategies, investment products for historically excluded communities, social bonds, and environmental reinvestments. He launched FlexCheck, a no-fee checking account that quickly attracted millions of gig economy workers. Internally, the initiative was lauded. Externally, investors saw only rising costs and questioned his operational focus. By the end of Q3, the board grew wary. Malik received emails filled with phrases like mission creep, brand dilution, and investor fatigue. One memo even warned him to be cautious of over-indexing on social outcomes. Still, Malik pressed on. In early 2025, he blocked a proposal by board chairman Preston Hale to underwrite a bond for a private prison conglomerate. The deal was lucrative, high yield, low risk, but morally reprehensible. Malik stood firm. "We don't build black wealth on black incarceration," he told the board. The next day, Heritage's stock slipped by 2.7%. That's when the campaign against him truly began. Subtle at first, his requests for new hiring approvals were delayed. Invitations to investor roundtables were forgotten. His internal memos on community initiatives were reworded before board circulation, toned down, sanitized, de-radicalized. In public, the board smiled and praised him. In private, they plotted. Malik wasn't blind. He'd grown up navigating white spaces, trained to read the room twice, once for what was said, and again for what was hidden. He saw the cues when his executive assistant was reassigned without notice, when anonymous sources began leaking performance concerns to the press, when his monthly reviews, once glowing, were suddenly marked mixed. But what hurt more than the corporate sabotage was the slow betrayal by people he once mentored, peers who chose silence over solidarity, colleagues who saw the tide turning and stepped back. "You're making people uncomfortable, Malik," one director said, almost kindly. "You're reminding them of things they'd rather ignore." But Malik didn't step back. He pushed forward. He commissioned an internal report on racial wealth gaps across Heritage's client base. The findings were damning. Despite Heritage's diverse branding, over 80% of lending capital still went to white-owned businesses. Malik proposed a bold corrective action plan, a $2 billion equitable lending program focused on first-time black homeowners and minority-owned business startups. The board balked. Hale called the proposal socialist. "You're taking us into activist banking," he warned. "This isn't your personal protest movement." Malik's response was simple. "No, this is reparative capitalism. If we don't evolve, we dissolve." The next shareholder meeting was tense. Hale manipulated the narrative, presenting Malik's plan as high risk and politically polarizing. Major investors began to waver. Then came the infamous anonymous blog post titled "The CEO Who Confused Banking with Activism." Though unconfirmed, Malik knew it had board fingerprints all over it. The piece accused him of being more interested in black Twitter than balance sheets and mocked his partnerships with grassroots organizations as pandering. It spread fast. Cable news picked it up. Anonymous sources within Heritage confirmed concerns about the CEO's focus. Malik didn't flinch publicly, but he was exhausted. For weeks he barely slept, working late, meeting with allies, trying to hold together the mission that had given him life. He still held faith in the idea that results would silence the critics, that the numbers would speak louder than the dog whistles. But the numbers were no longer enough. One Friday afternoon, as he reviewed updated risk assessments with Priya, his director of strategy, she slid a report across the table. "Look at page 6, she said quietly. It was a private consultancy's analysis, commissioned without his knowledge, showing a proposal to restructure Heritage's executive leadership to restore investor confidence. His name was the only one marked for replacement. Malik leaned back, heart thudding. "It's the setup," Priya said. "You climbed the cliff, Malik. Now they're waiting for the wind to blow." The next day, a meeting invitation appeared on his calendar. Subject: Strategic Continuity Discussion with Chairman Hale. Time: Friday, 6 a.m. Location: Executive Boardroom. B. He knew what it meant. No other staffers were copied. No agenda was listed. The early hour, the vague title. It was a dismissal dressed in diplomatic language. But Malik didn't panic. He called Ayanna Lewis, his legal counsel. He forwarded the meeting invite to Devontae and Marcus. He opened his desk drawer and removed the handwritten note his grandmother once gave him. "They don't want your fire, but they'll learn to live in your light." He placed the note in his jacket pocket. The night before the meeting, he didn't review stock charts or draft talking points. He sat in his daughter's room as she slept and watched her breathe. The future was always watching, even in dreams. At 5:15 a.m., he walked into the bank's atrium. He took a long breath and listened to the echo of his own footsteps, those same steps that once sounded like progress, now muffled under the weight of betrayal. He approached the boardroom like a man walking into a storm, not to be swallowed by it, but to meet it head-on. Because even if the glass shattered, Malik Johnson would not fall. He would rise, and they had no idea just how high he was prepared to climb. The door to Executive Boardroom B was heavy. Oak, hand-carved, a relic of Heritage Capital's Gilded Age beginnings. Malik Johnson had opened it hundreds of times before, always as a leader. This time, he entered with quiet resolve, knowing it was likely his final time doing so with authority. The long glass table shimmered under recessed lighting. 10 chairs were occupied, each one filled with someone Malik had once trusted, or at least tolerated. At the head sat Preston Hale, flanked by Gina Lawson, the board's newest and most publicly visible member. Malik walked to the empty seat across from Hale and calmly set down a single folder. He didn't greet anyone. "Let's begin," Hale said briskly, without a smile. This meeting was called to ensure continuity. The board has grown concerned about strategic drift. Malik didn't flinch. "Strategic drift? You mean ethical direction?" Gina interjected. "Let's not be combative. We're here to discuss leadership alignment and investor confidence." Malik opened his folder, pulling out printed performance data. Revenue from community partnerships is up 18% year over year. Deposit growth is at a 5-year high. Client retention is stronger than any fiscal cycle since 2018. So what exactly is the concern? "The concern," Hale said, steepling his fingers, "is optics. Your initiatives, while noble, are now being seen as polarizing. The prison bond refusal cost us 2 hedge fund relationships. Your Juneteenth equity drive was interpreted as justice," Malik interrupted, "or was it the fact that the campaign went viral without your approval?" The room was silent. Gina glanced at her tablet, then cleared her throat. "We're recommending a leadership transition. The vote was held prior to this meeting, per emergency protocol under Bylaw 7.2. Malik sat back. "Emergency protocol? You held a vote to remove me before this meeting even began?" 6 for, 3 against, 2 abstentions, Hale said. "Effective immediately. The board has appointed Gina as interim CEO." Malik stared at the faces around the table. None met his eyes. Some were embarrassed, others relieved. 1 or 2 looked smug, but none were surprised. "Understood," Malik said, voice calm. "But let me be clear, you haven't removed me. You've simply unchained me." Hale raised a brow. "What's that supposed to mean?" Malik stood and straightened his jacket. "You think you're playing chess, but you've just made your last move on a board I designed." He turned to Gina. "Congratulations, you're now in charge of a company whose heart is no longer beating." Without another word, he walked out. Downstairs, employees had begun to gather. Rumors of the vote had already leaked through private chat channels. Malik's removal had gone from secret coup to public scandal in under an hour. At 8:03 a.m., a live stream began broadcasting from a break room, capturing snippets of the board's closed-door statements. At 8:06, an anonymous email hit the inboxes of several financial reporters. Evidence of board-level bias at Heritage Capital, source inside. At 8:14 a.m., "We stand with Malik" began trending again. Inside Malik's brownstone, a team of loyal staff and advisors were already laying groundwork for a counterstrike. Ayanna Lewis filed an emergency injunction alleging discriminatory practices. Devontae pulled financial flows for top shareholders. Marcus retrieved archived footage from prior board meetings, some of which caught Hale using coded language about image and cultural fit. But the most powerful move came from outside the firm. By midday, Diaspora Fund, a majority black investment group and Malik's longtime ally, announced an aggressive tender offer. They were prepared to buy out a significant share of Heritage stock and force a leadership referendum. Simultaneously, several major depositors, black-owned cooperatives, community groups and small businesses began withdrawing funds en masse. Within 24 hours, Heritage reported a 4% liquidity drop. Malik remained mostly silent during those first hours. He made no public statements, no interviews. But that silence was not absence, it was preparation. The next day, he streamed live from a mural in Harlem, standing in front of a painting of Greenwood Tulsa. His words were simple. "They revoked my title. Not my mission, not my vision, and certainly not your trust. Heritage never belonged to a boardroom. It belongs to the people who believed in it. We will build again." Behind him, a banner unfurled. Headquarters. For us. By us. The speech was watched by 1.3 million people. The press labeled it a rebellion. Wall Street called it a disruption. Malik, he called it a restoration, because he understood something his opponents never did. You can fire a man. You cannot fire a movement. Malik Johnson stood in his brownstone's doorway as the city buzzed around him. Brooklyn was wide awake, honking cars, corner store radios, the clatter of carts on cracked sidewalks, but his world had narrowed to a singular truth. He had been exiled, unjustly, strategically, deliberately, but he was not alone. Inside, his living room had been transformed overnight into a war room. Cables snaked across the hardwood floor, laptops hummed on every surface, and the air buzzed with urgency. Around the dining table sat his most loyal allies, Ayanna Lewis, his legal counsel, Marcus, the tech-savvy mentee who refused to let him go down quietly, Yvonne from marketing, and Devontae, head of community lending. Each one of them had left Heritage that morning in silent protest. "Security wiped your login," Marcus said, not looking up from his laptop. "But not before I mirrored the Slack server. Everything they said in those channels, every joke, every plan to push you out, is documented." Ayanna nodded. "We've got a solid case for breach of contract and racial discrimination, but more than that, we've got leverage." Malik leaned against the wall, arms folded. "No one's filing anything until I say. I don't want retribution, I want restoration." "Then we better move fast," Devontae said. "Clients are already calling me. They're angry, scared, confused, but they're still loyal to you." "Good," Malik said, "because we're not just defending my name. We're defending what that bank was supposed to stand for." They began organizing. Yvonne drafted a manifesto, clear, direct, and unapologetic. It would serve as their call to action. Marcus set up a private communication network using encrypted servers. Devontae began calling trusted partners, black-owned credit unions, cooperatives, and church leaders. Meanwhile, social media was on fire. The hashtags #We Stand With Malik and #Heritage Hijacked dominated timelines. Employees from multiple branches posted anonymous messages of solidarity. A few even leaked internal emails showing that Malik's firing had been in motion for months. Others shared stories of how his policies changed lives: first-time home ownership, medical loans with no interest, community investment initiatives. He wasn't just their boss, he was their symbol of hope. But Malik stayed quiet, intentionally so. In moments like these, noise was a weapon, but silence was strategy. At 6 p.m. the doorbell rang. It was Lionel Green from Diaspora Fund, the activist investment firm that had supported Malik's rise from the very beginning. "I brought friends," Lionel said, stepping aside to reveal 2 other fund leaders and a young data analyst wheeling a monitor. "What are we looking at?" Malik asked. The analyst powered on the screen. "Heritage's stock dropped 6% in 12 hours. Media narratives turned. Board credibility is shaky. You've got power, Malik, if you want it." He did. "What's the plan?" Lionel asked. Malik didn't hesitate. "We take the soul of Heritage and build it back. Bigger, freer, and fully ours." Thus, Equitrust Collective was born, a hybrid initiative that would act as both a financial institution and a movement, not just a competitor to Heritage, but a successor to everything it claimed to be. They began outlining the structure: ownership distributed among community investors, board members elected by public vote, profits reinvested into the neighborhoods they served. It was bold, disruptive, and dangerous to the status quo. That night, Malik gave his first public statement since the ousting. He didn't do it through a press conference. He went live from his own Instagram. In front of a bookshelf filled with black literature and family photos, he looked directly into the lens and said, "When I founded Heritage, I believed finance could be a tool of justice. That belief hasn't changed. What's changed is who gets to decide what justice looks like. They removed me because I wouldn't serve their bottom line at the cost of our people. So now I serve no one but you. This movement is yours. Let's build what they feared we might." Within minutes, the live stream exploded. Donations poured in, activists offered support, celebrities reposted the clip, church leaders organized community meetings. By midnight, the Equitrust website crashed from traffic. The next morning, Bloomberg ran the headline, "Ousted CEO Sparks Financial Uprising," and the Root called him the architect of the new Black Wall Street. Meanwhile, Heritage scrambled. Hale issued a statement calling Malik misguided and emotionally reactive. But it rang hollow. The world had already seen the board for what it was, fearful, rigid, and greedy. Inside the Heritage offices, unrest spread. Workers wore black in silent protest. Depositors began closing accounts, one by one, quietly, deliberately, in unity. In less than 72 hours, Malik had gone from exiled CEO to revolutionary figurehead. But he knew this was just the beginning. They hadn't just removed him from a title. They had released him into a larger truth. And now the movement he planted was blooming faster than anyone could stop. It started with a whisper in Baton Rouge. Miss Alberta, a retired school teacher, walked into her local Heritage Capital branch with a checkbook and a cane. She calmly withdrew her life savings, $18,300, and asked the teller to transfer it to Equitrust Collective. When asked why, she simply said, "Because I trust Malik more than I trust any of y'all." By the end of that week, she was one of 11,000 customers across the country who had moved their money in protest. The community was rising. In Detroit, barbershops began hanging up signs, "Equitrust Ally, ask us why." In Atlanta, a megachurch held a town hall in its sanctuary, where members shared stories of Malik's policies, helping them avoid foreclosure or fund college for their children. In Oakland, a collective of food truck owners launched the People's Loan Fund, seeded entirely through Equitrust micro-grants. Malik watched it all unfold from the Brooklyn brownstone, both humbled and electrified. What he'd hoped would catch spark had become a blaze. But it wasn't enough to just be a symbol. He needed infrastructure. His war room, now staffed with a rotating crew of volunteers, organizers, former Heritage staff and students, expanded into a full operational hub. They named it the Commons, and its heartbeat was a shared conviction that Black communities didn't need permission to create power, they just needed coordination. Yvonne led communications. Her voice overlaid mini-documentaries showcasing Equitrust success stories went viral. One featured a mechanic in Baltimore who opened his first brick-and-mortar shop thanks to a $12,000 equity-based loan. Another told of a single mother in Milwaukee whose medical bills were wiped clean after a church-based mutual aid network plugged into Equitrust's new platform. Devontae launched the Repair Fund, a program that forgave old debt in exchange for community service hours. By week 3, over $3 million in medical debt had been cleared. Marcus developed an app, TrustNet, which allowed members to track where every dollar went. It gave people real-time control over their financial ecosystem, fostering transparency and collective decision-making. "This is what Heritage never gave us," he told Malik one night. "Not just access, agency." Still, challenges mounted. Hale and the Heritage Board had gone from dismissive to defensive. In a nationally televised interview, Hale claimed Malik was fomenting instability under the guise of equity and warned that investors don't follow emotion. He wasn't wrong. Major firms were nervous, but they were also watching closely, and some, quietly, were hedging their bets. Then came the breaking point. On the morning of July 1st, the New York Times published an exposé titled "The Emails They Didn't Want You to See." It included internal Heritage communications leaked by an anonymous source, most likely a disgruntled executive assistant. The emails revealed Preston Hale mocking Malik's Juneteenth campaign as urban PR fluff, a proposed strategy memo titled Containment of Cultural Disruption, discussions about deliberately limiting Malik's access to investor presentations. The fallout was swift and brutal. Heritage's stock dropped 11% in 2 days. Several major institutional investors issued public statements condemning the board's actions. Depositor outflows hit record highs. For the first time, Malik wasn't just defending his name, he was winning. He called a press conference outside a closed Heritage branch in Harlem. The metal gate was down. Behind him, a crowd of hundreds, clergy, artists, business owners, students, gathered with banners reading, "Banks belong to the people. And our equity, our rules." "This," Malik said into the microphone, "isn't about revenge, it's about redefinition. We were told banking had to look a certain way, that inclusion was a risk, that justice was a liability. But look around, do we look risky to you?" Applause surged. Phones streamed. The speech racked up over 2 million views by sundown. Back in the Commons, Malik's team toasted with sparkling cider. Ayana stepped beside him on the balcony. "You ever think it would get this big?" she asked. "I hoped it would," Malik said, "but I didn't think it would feel this right." "Feels like a revolution," she whispered. "But revolutions have enemies." Late that night, Malik received a cease and desist letter from Heritage's legal team, accusing him of misappropriating brand messaging and trade secrets. It was toothless, but symbolic. "They're scared," Ayana said, tossing the letter onto the table. "That means we're close. Closer than anyone realized." Because that very same night, Diaspora Fund quietly reached out to Equitrust's leadership team with a proposal, a shareholder-led takeover of Heritage Capital. They now had the public. They had the capital. They now had the public. They had the capital. And soon, they might just have the votes. Malik stood before a whiteboard filled with flowcharts, timelines, and hashtags. He looked around the room, people from all walks of life, united by purpose, and smiled. "This is not just about one man taking back a seat," he said. "It's about making sure that seat was never theirs to begin with." The community wasn't just rising, it was ascending. The wind had shifted. Inside Heritage Capital's marble-clad headquarters, anxiety simmered. Phone lines buzzed non-stop. Employees spoke in hushed tones. Department heads tiptoed around the subject that was on everyone's mind. Malik Johnson was coming back, and not as an employee, as the owner. It started quietly. A leaked spreadsheet revealed that Diaspora Fund had secured 22.6% of voting shares. Then 2 more institutional investors defected from the board's camp, swayed by growing public backlash and declining stock performance. Combined with the 7% owned by Malik's allies, the opposition bloc had crossed the 30% threshold, enough to trigger a special shareholders' meeting. Chairman Hale scrambled, emergency calls, lobbying, damage control, but it was too late. A formal notice was filed. A vote to restructure the board and reinstate Malik Johnson as CEO would take place within 72 hours. Wall Street held its breath. Malik, calm and methodical, did not posture. He didn't gloat. Instead, he held meetings in the Commons, refining a new charter with Ayana and Lionel, not just for Heritage, but for a reimagined financial model, one that placed justice, transparency, and shared ownership at its core. "Don't just make them regret firing you," Lionel told him. "Make them regret ever underestimating what you stand for." The night before the vote, Malik returned to his childhood home in Tulsa. He sat quietly beside his grandmother's old ledger, flipping through pages of community trust and handwritten promises. Her words echoed in his mind. Balance ain't just math, it's justice. He carried that wisdom back with him to New York, tucked in a leather briefcase alongside his notes for what would become the most consequential board meeting in Heritage's history. When the day arrived, the atmosphere was electric. The shareholder meeting was held at the Heritage Conference Hall in Manhattan. Reporters packed the street outside. Protesters and supporters lined the sidewalks holding signs that read, "Bring Malik back," and "Banks should serve people, not profit." Inside, the room was bright, clinical, and tense. Malik entered flanked by Ayana and Lionel, dressed not in a power suit, but in a tailored navy ensemble with a single black lapel pin in the shape of a key. His calm presence made Hale visibly squirm. The moderator read out the agenda. Item 1, motion to restructure the board. Item 2, motion to reinstate Malik Johnson as Chief Executive Officer. Preston Hale stood, giving a prepared statement. He warned shareholders of instability, of activism eclipsing business sense. He invoked numbers, volatility, and legacy. But the room didn't lean in, it leaned back. Then Malik took the stage. He spoke without notes. "You all know my track record. You know what we've built, what I built, with you, not in spite of you. They called my decisions risky, but ask the families who got homes, the entrepreneurs who launched stores, the students who now have college funds. We didn't lose market share because I failed. We lost it because they feared that banking could be more than greed. I wasn't fired because of poor performance. I was fired because I wouldn't pretend with injustice. Today, you choose between two futures, one built on nostalgia for a broken past, or one that believes our best days are ahead. If you want growth, trust. If you want strength, serve. And if you want a future that doesn't collapse under the weight of its hypocrisy, then stop calling equity a liability." Silence followed. Then came applause. The vote commenced. Within 15 minutes, the results were in. Motion passed. Malik Johnson reinstated as CEO. Motion passed. Hale and 2 others removed from board. Motion passed. A new equity-based charter to be implemented. Malik didn't smile. He nodded once, quietly. This wasn't triumph, it was restoration. Gina Lawson, who had been interim CEO for a brief and tension-filled 3 weeks, walked over to shake his hand. She looked embarrassed. "I didn't realize," she whispered. He replied simply, "Now you do." By evening, the news had exploded across every major outlet. CEO returns after hostile ouster, brings justice with him. The architect takes back the house he built. Heritage reclaimed. But Malik wasn't celebrating. He was already at work. Within hours, he restructured executive compensation, capped bonus payouts, and established a public-facing transparency dashboard. He gave every employee, from janitors to junior analysts, a stake in the company. The new board included community representatives. Every new product would be reviewed by an ethical impact committee. That night, standing alone in the boardroom, Malik looked out at the skyline he once viewed with longing. Now it was his canvas. He removed the plaque that read Chairman's Office, Preston Hale, and handed it to a janitor walking by. "Use it as a doorstop," he said with a grin, and then he turned back to the table. Not to sit at the head, but to sit with his team. Because power wasn't a throne, it was a shared table. And now everyone had a seat. Sun poured through the bank's 40-foot skylight, striking the polished floor in geometric patches of gold. It was Malik Johnson's first dawn back at Heritage Capital as CEO, but the building already felt transformed. Overnight, maintenance crews had removed portraits of long-dead industrialists and hung a temporary banner. "We don't hold power, we circulate it." Employees arrived to find surprises at every turn. Automatic doors now slid open to a welcome desk staffed by 2 paid interns from the summer youth program Malik had funded years earlier. A new coffee kiosk offered free cups sourced from black-owned roasters. Its tip jar fed the community grant pool. And in the center of the lobby stood a glossy touchscreen kiosk, the transparency dashboard, streaming real-time data on deposits, loan approvals, and executive salaries. At 8 a.m. sharp, Malik convened the first all-hands meeting. Rather than claiming the stage alone, he invited a trio of voices to stand beside him. Miss Alberta from Baton Rouge, whose quiet withdrawal had sparked the run on Heritage. Keisha Ramirez, a former gig worker who'd helped beta test FlexCheck. And James Carlton, the janitor who still carried Hale's plaque in his backpack as a reminder of what arrogance looked like. They each spoke for 3 minutes about trust, about resilience, about finally seeing themselves in the halls of capital. Then Malik laid out the new blueprint, 10 initiatives to ensure the bank's soul could never again be repossessed. Shared ownership, every employee, executive to custodian, would receive voting equity distributed annually. Community board seats, 2 positions permanently reserved for depositors elected by customer ballot. Ethical veto power. An independent impact committee could veto any product deemed harmful to marginalized communities. Debt repair fund, 10% of quarterly net profit dedicated to forgiving predatory debt incurred before a customer joined Heritage. Living wage mandate. No salary within the company could be less than 1/15 of the CEO's total compensation. Transparent bonus index, all performance bonuses tied to metrics that balanced profitability with community benefit. Green and just lending, a climate justice loan program prioritizing renewable projects in low-income neighborhoods. Open Books Week. Once per quarter, the public could tour operations, question executives, and audit select books. Freedom to unionize. Formal recognition of employee unions with a seat at strategy meetings. Legacy Labs. A paid fellowship for descendants of Greenwood, Rosewood, and other destroyed black economies to design future products. Some observers expected pushback, but the applause was thunderous. Employees weren't losing power, they were gaining purpose. By mid-morning, news outlets ran live shots of customers queuing outside branches to open new accounts. Heritage's app, refreshed overnight with a sunrise orange color palette and a justice score meter, climbed the finance chart on every app store. Across the river, Preston Hale watched the coverage from a private club. He twirled an untouched espresso, face grey. He had expected Malik's return to be fiery, maybe even reckless, something that investors would find easy to attack. Instead, it was methodical and, for the first time in Heritage's modern history, widely loved. Hale's phone pinged. His last loyal ally had resigned from the board, citing irreconcilable values. Back at headquarters, Malik spent the afternoon in rooms he once never had time to visit. The basement mail center, the rooftop HVAC deck, the cramped archive where decades of handwritten mortgage ledgers sat gathering dust. In each place, he asked the staff 2 questions. What do you need, and what would justice look like here? He wrote the answers in a leather notebook, Lila May's ledger reincarnated. Evening settled, and the building buzzed with volunteers installing a mural in the atrium. The architects. It depicted communities lifting a foundation together, no lone heroes, only interlocking hands, passing bricks skyward. Malik dabbed paint on the final brick himself, then stepped back, eyes stinging. A soft voice interrupted. Amara, now holding a copy of the day's newspaper, pointed to the headline, Banking on Justice, Heritage's Radical Rebirth. Daddy, does this mean everyone gets a bank like yours now? She asked. He knelt beside her. It means we showed it's possible, and when people know something is possible, they make it inevitable. Night fell, but no one rushed home. The lobby became a community block party, jazz quartet by the windows, food trucks out front, impromptu job fair kiosks along the marble wall. Malik circulated without entourage, greeting tellers, security guards, rival bankers who slipped in to witness history. Near midnight he returned to his office, once Hale's sanctum, now redesigned with a round reclaimed wood table instead of an executive desk. Waiting there was Ayana with fresh numbers. Day 1 deposits up 9%, 36 resignations rescinded, social impact investors pledging an additional $500 million in capital. "You rebuilt trust in 24 hours, she said. "Do you ever rest?" Malik smiled, weary but alive. "Rest is coming, but justice woke up today. It's stretching its legs." He opened the balcony doors. Below, the Manhattan skyline glittered. The towers that had once looked impregnable now seemed, in the warm summer air, like dominoes awaiting a wiser hand. Malik took out his grandmother's worn ledger page, taped it to the new conference wall, and inscribed beside it, "Balance equals math times justice." Because the story of a bank wasn't numbers or marble or even power, it was memory carried forward, multiplied by courage. And tonight, Heritage Capital, reborn under the torch of community, was proof that walls built to exclude could be redrawn into doors wide enough for everyone. Outside, somewhere in Brooklyn, sunrise began its slow approach. Malik exhaled and closed the balcony door, ready to meet the light again.